Hello there and welcome back to my YouTube channel, James here as ever for today's video all about how to pass your upcoming business and technology exam. That's the previous accounting and business paper, also known as the F1 paper. If this is the first time you've visited my channel before, hello, my name is James, I'm an ACCA qualified member from the UK, and on my channel I help out ACCA students, accounting professionals pass their examinations. And I always dedicate all my videos to my lovely subscribers with their requests. And today is no different because, as you can see down here, Mohammed, thank you so much for getting in touch. And if you've got any questions like Mohammed, drop me a comment below. I answer them all and more than happy to help because as you can see on here, sir, I failed the actual foundation for business technology. I'm so sorry to hear that, Mohammed. Actually failed it twice, 48 and 46. Oh my gosh. So close, but trust me, this video will help you. As you can see on here, please guide me to focus on which areas to pass. Well, Mohammed, my friend, do not worry, I have got you covered. In this video, I'm going to take you through my 3 top tips. I've put the actual timings in the description below as well, along with all the links and actual recommended texts. So feel free to check them out. They'd be the ones I'd definitely be using as well. If you do find the video helpful, which I'm hoping you will, give it a massive like as well, because these are little tips and tricks that I'd be implementing if I had to sit my business technology exam just like you. So let's get started because we want to be in that 85%. That is the average pass mark for students who sit this exam. So in other words, for every 100 students that actually go and do the exam, 85 pass. Because I think the first way to pass this exam, and this is tip number 1, would be using my exam time strategy on here. So you've got to think to yourself, well, okay, the business technology exam, F1 paper, is 2 hours long. All the questions are compulsory, so I've got to answer them all. So I've got 120 minutes, I've got 100 marks, so that means that's 1.2 minutes per mark, okay? And for anyone who's a bit new maybe to the business technology exam, you've got 2 sections, section A and B. In section A, you've got 30 objective test questions, so you might see the term OTQs in your actual notes, and the 30 questions are 2 marks on there. There are also in section A 16 OTQs again, and these are 1 mark each. So in other words, section A, to get down in your notes from this video, you've got 76 marks, and multiplying that by 1.2 gives you 91.2 minutes on there, so just over an hour and a half. Whereas section B, okay, has 6 multitask questions, so these are MTQs on here, and each of those are 4 marks each. So 24 marks for section B at 1.2 minutes per mark, and that comes in at 28 minutes, well, 28.8 minutes to be specific on that. So that would be your sort of bog standard, right? Go and do section A, 1.5 hours, then go do section B, 1.5 hours. There you go, James, there's your strategy. Well, that is not what I would do. That gives you just sort of a rough estimation of to the level of time, but you've got to say to yourself, so, okay, James, what would be your time strategy going into this? Okay, well, don't worry, I've got you. What I've done for you is I'll put it up here because obviously I'm getting very good at the editing now. It's pretty simple, but it will require a lot of question practice. But let me walk and talk you through what it actually means and then how it will benefit you. So first of all, I'm saying to myself, right, section A, with those objective test questions, the first 45 minutes, I'm just going to walk and talk it through. So there are 46 questions on there. I'm thinking to myself, 45 minutes, I can probably have a good go at answering all of them. And if I didn't actually know any of them or I was getting really confused, I'd flag it on the system because we've got time later to come back and have a look at it. But that would be what I'd be saying to myself, let's get the ball rolling, 45 minutes in, section A, fully focused, lots of energy as well, because section A is one of the areas where people make so many silly mistakes. They don't read the question properly, they don't understand what they're being asked for, and they just throw away marks. So that's the first 45 minutes. Then the next 30 minutes is for actual section B. I know what you're thinking there straight away, well, hang on, James, didn't you say up above that give or take for section B, you should only be spending half an hour on it? Good point. Yes, you're right. We're on the same wavelength. The reason why I'm going to allocate a bit of time from section A into section B is because section B, in my opinion, is the tougher of the two sections. So let's keep it simple, and you'll notice on here I keep the timing really quite easy on here as well. So 45 minutes, then on to half an hour. This means that you can keep an eye on the clock more effectively, because I see some people recommending, oh, James, go and do 26.2 minutes on this. And they're going, if I'm in an exam, I've got no chance of following that. So hence why I'm here. I've got more energy in the first hour, and then an hour and 15, I've gone through section A and section B. So at this point in the exam, you've actually got 45 minutes left, and you're saying to yourself, well, okay, I'm going to now spend 30 minutes going back onto section A, and this is the key thing to get down on your notes here. This is what I'll be thinking, going through every question, and I'd probably start off with the ones that maybe I flagged have not got an answer. But all of the ones on here now for this final 45 minutes, it's all about checking your answers and picking up on silly mistakes. I'm going into this last 45 minutes assuming that I have made mistakes. In fact, it's not even assuming. I know I'll have made mistakes. I'd have put down a wrong answer, something on those lines. So the first half an hour is the actual section A, going through it. And then the final 15 minutes is reviewing section B on there as well. So first 45 minutes of the exam, section A, then half an hour on section B, then another half an hour on section A, and the final 15 minutes on section B, or if you've got a few minutes left, reallocate those back into section A. But do not leave the exam early. You will always make mistakes, and you don't want to be getting that 48, 49 and just knowing you could have spent that last few minutes and gone through and picked up on those extra marks. It will be tough, but you've got to give yourself that chance to actually go back and check your answers, and this is the way that I would approach that on there to pick up on those silly mistakes. So that is tip number 1, my exam time strategy on there. I know what you're thinking, oh, I didn't think of it like that, because it's the learning curve as you go through, and you'll make less mistakes, pick up on those marks. So tip number 2 now, key one on here, is the actual business technology syllabus insights on here. So firstly, we've got to get the record straight for the video and for YouTube on here. You cannot question spot on this exam. There is no one area that I can say to you that is going to be on there, because the external examiner has told us that anything can be tested. If you don't believe me, check out the other videos on my YouTube, because I highlight it all the time on there. But they do give us a nugget of information as to section B for the actual 6 multitask questions, and they can cover any of the following areas. And I'm going to put it up here for you, so if you want to take a photo of it or pause the video on there, whatever works best for you. I have done a video on this from the actual syllabus analysis, but these are the general overview areas that going into the exam, if you're comfortable to talk about all these areas, you've got a very good chance of passing. So as you can see on there, you've got section A, the actual business organisation, stakeholders, who's interested in how the business is operating, internal, external, and then external environmental factors. You've got the organisational structure, accounting and reporting systems, managing individuals and teams, personal effectiveness. So as you go through, and finally, and not to overlook it, the professional ethics on there. But this is just to give you a little flavour that it's not just accounting and finance, it's the business knowledge and application on there as well to the scenarios you're given and the statements as well on top of it. For the professional ethics, you've got to consider integrity, objectivity, professional competence and due care, professional behaviour on there as well. Absolutely fundamental areas, and confidentiality is the final one. So if you're completely new to business technology and the examination, maybe you've not done a computer-based exam before, well, I've got you covered. If you go and check out this on my channel, I've been through a full business technology computer-based examination from start to finish. You can go through it and actually pause it as you go through. What answer would you put? What answer did I put? And I'll walk and talk you through why you could get this wrong, and then how you can improve going through it, okay? Because the best way to prepare for this examination, as we touched on, is to cover all of the areas of the syllabus And if you haven't got the up-to-date materials as well, I've put links in the video as well, so check them out. They're all discounted down there to help you out. These would be the ones that I'd recommend and use if I was in your position, because the main fundamental area to actually passing this exam is covering all the syllabus, regardless of how much of a finance background you've got, loads of question practice, and then applying that actual general business knowledge to whatever requirement you're given. You also got to accept that there will be on here as well the odd bit of theory or terms that you've just never heard of. Just pop that down in your notes, that expect things to come up that you just go, where does that come from? I have no idea on it. Because when I went through that computer-based examination video, there are some things on there I went, oh my word, that is really specific. And unless you've read that one sentence on it, then you're not going to know that. So the way to get around that, because it is multiple choice on here, you've got different options, is first of all, apply your professional knowledge to try and work out, well, what actually looks reasonable here from these answers. So maybe get that jotted down in your notes. Break down the actual requirement and scenario and the points that you're given within the question, and then eliminate the different options to say, that can't possibly be right. And before you know it, you might have 2 options rather than 4, and you've got a higher percentage chance of getting it right. Well, that is tip number 2, the actual business technology syllabus insights. And if you follow those, you've got a really good chance of covering all the key aspects and then applying it with that question practice. Now, we're coming on to tip number 3 now. And this is James's business technology exam tips on here. So from all of my experience going through these questions, I just knowledge dumped down everything that came to my mind, and I'm just going to walk and talk you through. And first of all, the things that I think about with any exam that I've ever sat is, what are the easier parts or the easier questions on the examination? So I thought that on this one on here. So I'm there going, right, take a step back. Where are the easier questions to actually transpire this to you, so that you will know when you see these questions in the exam, right, I can get this. And first of all is in section A, and this is just my opinion as you go through, the 1 markers, okay, and these will be presented to you in either a yes or no format or true or false. So section A, the 1 markers, they're usually shorter, have very little to no background information, more sort of just a statement. And if you read it through correctly and really focus in on what it's asking for, it could just be a bit specific knowledge on there, but it should just be true or false. And then you can actually say, well, it can't be that, so it must be this. And you've only got 2 answers, so you've got a higher percentage chance of getting it right. The next easier ones on there are, again, section A, those 2 markers. But this is the key thing that you need to be aware of, especially with your question practice and getting used to the computer-based format, is the actual variety of question types on here. Okay, so the first one to get written down in your notes are the multiple choice questions. So this is where you might have 1 correct answer out of 2 or 3 on there, okay? Then next you have the multiple response questions. Now this is where you actually have to pick 2 correct answers out of, say, 3 or 4. And finally, you've also got the multiple response matching, also known as the MRMs on there. And this is where you actually use a sort of grid of choice they have. So it may be asking you, which of these stakeholders, how would you allocate them? And it may be 1 column on there, in the grid will be internal, the next would be external, and then the third one might be connected or something on those lines, just as an example off the top of my head. And you'd actually have to select if it was 1 of the 3 on there. So this is really important, as I touched on it above with the actual multiple response questions on here. So that means that you might get a question say, out of these options, pick the 2 correct answers out of 4, okay? And the reason why this is important, and again, this comes up in section A, is that you need to get both of those options correct in order to get the 2 marks in section A. So make sure you get that written down in your notes, because there is no 1 mark for 1 correct option. You need to get both of them right in section A to get the marks. So these are little insights from the external examiner's report that I wanted to share with you today, so that when you see it in section A, the 2-marker, those style of questions, that is where it's so key that you're more likely going to get one right on it. It's just being super sure that the second answer is definitely correct. Now, moving on to section B, and again, in my opinion, the most difficult of the lot, but from the actual multitask questions, and you've got 6 of them on there, partial marks are available in this part of the exam. So not like in section A that we touched on. So this is where, make sure you actually select the correct number of options, which we'll come on to later. But for example, maybe you might have to select 4, and if you got 2 of them right, well, maybe you might get a half mark for each of those. But just to be crystal clear, you do get partial marks in section B, but you don't get them in section A. Now, the next thing to pick up on, and I did allude to it earlier, and the external examiner points this out on their actual review from their external examiner's comments, is that students go from section A, where they only have to select one answer, and they get into that sort of habit or examination mindset that when they get onto section B and they have to select more than one answer, that they may have to select 2, 3, 4, for example, but they still only select one. They don't read the question properly. So in other words, they could get 4 marks on there for 4 answers, but they only answer 1. So they're throwing away 3 marks. So just please write that down, not to make that silly mistake about selecting one answer that you would do in section A and then not reading it correctly and then doing that in section B. So silly, but the external examiner notes this, that students do this on every sitting, and therein the reason why there are the 15% that fail this exam. Section B can also have different methods of testing you on this. This is just to share the insight so that, in other words, whatever comes up on the exam, you've got nothing to worry about. First one to note down is something called a hotspot question, and this is where you actually have to click on the correct number of boxes, so it will tell you in the actual requirement, select 3 or choose 2, something like that. Next one is something called number entry question. Very rare, and that's the words of the actual external examiner now, but they can be tested. So you've got to be careful and get this jotted down about the denominations and the actual format that you're being asked to put this down in, because they've previously tested actual dollars with millions, or they've actually also had dollars with, say, 3 zeros on the end. So make sure you understand what format you're actually having to write the answer in. And then lastly on there, for the last type of question, we've got something called a gap fill. So what you'd be given is a sort of sentence or paragraph, and then you'd actually have to fill the gaps on there provided. Now the key thing to note down on here is you don't actually have to type in the word. They'll actually have a pull down on there for you, and this is where exam technique and that question practice comes into it. That you've got to ask yourself and reread that sentence or paragraph and say to yourself, to the best of my knowledge, does that sound reasonable? And if you walk and talk it through the different options, that'll be a very good way of going about this. But this is one of the reasons why we allocated more time, as we talked about before, to section B and took it away from section A, which should be a bit easier for you. Now, the final points that are really key, okay? So try to pick up on in the actual requirement or the potential little scenario, it'll only be a few lines on there, what the technical term is. So it could be about profit, it could be about management, it could be about the business itself. If you identify where is the key term in here, that will really home in your business technology knowledge, and you're going to have a better percentage chance of getting it right, in my opinion. That also links into any keywords, and next thing to get down is what is bold within the question or in capitals. This is where reading it correctly, that are we answering 2 options or 3? Have they referred to a particular area, maybe assets or liabilities, whatever it may be? This is where use that time strategy to go through your notes on here and go through your answers to find those mistakes that maybe you didn't actually read the bold and capitals first time round, but that is why we have those extra time at the end to go through it. As I talked about it as well, time at the end to go through it, But do not end and finish the exam early. Another reason why the external examiner says that students fail this exam is that they've just gone through and answered what they think, and they can see when you've submitted the exam and they finish early, they've not properly read it through, and that's where the silly mistakes come in, and they don't allocate time to go back and review it. They sort of just think, oh, I've answered it now, so that'll do. Don't fall into that trap, because you will be in the 15% who fail on this exam. And if you follow the tips in the video, then you'll be in the 85% that actually pass this exam as well. The final things I'll be saying is, when you're going back to reviewing your answers, you've got to go in with a mindset to say, there are mistakes in here. So whether that's just having a bit of water when you're changing from section to section, deep breaths, something to clear your mind as you go through, and go into it with a real critical mindset that you have got answers wrong. I know I've made silly mistakes, and these could be the little marks that get me that pass that I'm really looking for. Because that is tip number 3, James's business technology tips that could get you those little extra marks, as we said, to help you pass. Well, I hope you found the video helpful going through today. If you have, be sure to give it a massive like and thumbs up below. Thank you so much as ever for the support, and if you'd like access to all my free materials, you just need to hit the subscribe button below not to miss out on any future videos. But if you've got any questions on business technology, ACCA, whatever it may be, or requests for other videos, drop me a comment below. I answer them all, more than happy to help. And be sure to share the video with any other study buddies or friends who've got this exam. You know it's definitely going to help them on there. Well, the final thing I can say is best of luck with your actual examination for business technology. If you follow these tips through, along with watching the other videos on the channel, you are going to be absolutely fine. And what I've done for you as a treat is, so make sure you click on one of them. I've left a couple at the end here. They're definitely going to help you pass. And again, could be those extra couple of marks to get you over the line and pass. But as always on that bombshell, I'll see you next time. Cheers.